One minute, Cassidy was stranded at the airport, feeling hopeless. The next, a stranger stepped in to save the day. Little did she know, he was one of the most famous athletes in the country. Cassidy stepped into the bustling chaos of Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, dragging her small carry-on suitcase behind her. The familiar hum of 1,000 conversations, the sharp ping of departure announcements, and the clinical glow of fluorescent lights wrapped around her like an old, slightly uncomfortable friend. After a grueling transatlantic flight from London, exhaustion clung to her bones. But beneath the fatigue, excitement buzzed in her chest. Arizona. Home. The word felt warm, comforting, almost surreal after months of being away. As she weaved through the crowded terminal, she couldn't help but reflect on the past few months. London had been an experience. A whirlwind internship, late-night ramen dinners in a shoebox apartment, and the constant gnawing worry about money. She had scraped by, cutting corners wherever she could, but the financial strain had been relentless. Now, as she stood in the heart of LAX, a familiar anxiety prickled beneath the surface of her relief. Just a little longer, she thought. One more flight and I'm home. Cassidy adjusted the strap of her backpack, squared her shoulders, and approached the check-in counter with practiced confidence. She had done this a dozen times before. What could possibly go wrong? Then it happened. "That'll be $50 for your carry-on," the airline attendant said, her voice flat and mechanical, eyes already moving to the next passenger in line. Cassidy blinked. "Sorry, what?" "Your bag exceeds the free allowance. It's an additional $50 to bring it on board." A lump formed in Cassidy's throat. She reached into her purse, pulled out her wallet with shaky hands, and swiped her credit card. Declined. Confused, she tried again. Declined. A third time. Still declined. Her heart rate spiked. She forced a nervous laugh, fumbling for another card. Same result. One by one, each attempt was met with a cold, impersonal shake of the head from the attendant. "No, no, this can't be happening," Cassidy mumbled under her breath, heat creeping up her neck. She could feel the impatient gazes of the line behind her, the collective sighs of travelers who had places to be. Her fingers trembled as she checked her banking app, and a sinking realization dawned on her. Her overseas transactions must have triggered a security block. All her cards were frozen. "Miss, I'm sorry, but if you can't pay, you'll need to step aside and figure it out." The attendant's voice cut through Cassidy's rising panic, laced with detached politeness. Step aside? Miss the flight? Stay stranded here? A heavy knot formed in her stomach. Cassidy felt her pulse pounding in her ears. She swallowed hard, eyes darting around, searching for a solution, any solution, but there was nothing. Just the growing weight of the moment pressing down on her, turning her knees to jelly. And then, someone stepped forward. A deep, calm voice sliced through the noise around her. "I got it." Cassidy froze. She turned slowly to see him. A tall man, broad shoulders, a quiet confidence radiating from him like an aura. He wore a simple hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, but there was something about him, something strangely familiar. Her mind raced. Who was this guy? Why was he helping? And why did he look like he belonged to another world entirely? Cassidy's breath hitched in her throat. She had no idea who he was, but she was about to find out. Cassidy's fingers trembled as she rifled through her purse, pulling out receipts, boarding passes, and crumpled gum wrappers. Anything but the cash she so desperately needed. Her breathing grew shallow, heart pounding in her chest like a drum. She knew it was useless, yet she kept searching, as if sheer willpower could make money appear out of thin air. Come on. There has to be something," she muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the buzz of the airport. Swiping her credit card one more time, Cassidy watched the small screen blink back at her. Declined. Again. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of a dozen impatient eyes behind her, the shuffling feet, the muted whispers. The woman behind the counter, expressionless, efficient, offered a tight-lipped smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of annoyance. "Miss, I'm afraid if you can't pay the fee, you'll have to step aside and let the next passenger through," she said, her voice polite but firm. Cassidy's chest tightened. Step aside? The words hit her like a slap. If she moved from this spot, it meant admitting defeat. It meant missing her flight. It meant being stuck in this cold, fluorescent limbo with no way out. Her mind spun in a frenzy of options, none of them viable. Just give me a second, please, Cassidy pleaded, her voice cracking. She reached for her phone, hands trembling as she tapped the screen. 1% battery. A wave of dread washed over her. She tapped her mom's number and pressed call. A long pause. No signal. Then the screen flickered and went black. No, no, no. This can't be happening. Her eyes burned with the sting of impending tears. Cassidy forced herself to look around, hoping to catch a sympathetic glance, someone, anyone, who might help. But as her eyes scanned the crowd, all she saw were polite smiles and averted gazes. No one wanted to get involved. She felt an icy grip of embarrassment coil around her stomach. "Excuse me," she turned to the woman behind her in line, her voice wavering. "Would you mind spotting me? I can pay you back once I—" The woman, a middle-aged business traveler, offered an apologetic smile but shook her head. "I'm sorry, I really can't." The awkward shuffle of her feet made it clear she wanted no part in Cassidy's problem. Cassidy tried again, turning to an older man wearing a crisp navy suit, his expensive leather briefcase at his side. "Sir, I'm in a bit of a situation." "I'm sorry, dear. I don't carry cash." And just like that, the crushing reality settled in. She was completely alone in a sea of people. A memory from her childhood flickered through her mind. She was 6, standing in the middle of a crowded shopping mall, lost in a wave of towering adults. Her tiny hands clutching the hem of a stranger's coat, eyes wide with panic, until her mother had finally found her. That same helplessness wrapped around her now, suffocating, inescapable. "Miss, the boarding gate will be closing in 20 minutes. The words shattered Cassidy's thoughts, yanking her back to the present. She nodded numbly, stepping aside from the counter, feeling her entire world caving in. 20 minutes. That was all the time she had to figure this out, or she'd be stuck here with no way home. She dragged herself to a nearby bench, slumping into the cold plastic seat. Around her, life went on. Business travelers wheeling their polished suitcases, families chasing after toddlers, airport employees rushing past with purpose. Cassidy felt like a ghost, invisible and insignificant. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them, willing herself not to cry. How could she have let this happen? She should have checked her cards earlier. She should have had emergency cash. She should have so many things. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. But deep down, doubt gnawed at her. The overhead speakers blared another flight announcement, but it all blurred into white noise. Cassidy was sinking, drowning in the overwhelming realization that there was no one left to help her. And then, "I got it." The words were so unexpected, so startling, that for a moment, Cassidy thought she had imagined them. But when she looked up, there he was, the stranger. Tall, calm, effortless in his stance. His voice, smooth and steady, cut through her panic like a knife through butter. She blinked up at him, words failing her. "I'm sorry, what?" Cassidy asked, stunned. The man nodded toward the check-in counter. "I'll cover it." And just like that, hope flickered back to life. But as her eyes scanned his face, something tugged at her memory. There was something about him, something familiar. And yet, she couldn't quite place it. Cassidy stared at him, heart pounding. Who was he? She had no idea, but in that moment, she realized this stranger might just be her saving grace. Cassidy sat hunched over, elbows resting on her knees, eyes fixed on the cold tile floor of the airport terminal. The muffled sounds of rolling luggage and hurried footsteps blended into the background noise of her growing despair. This was it. She was stuck. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. And then, like a whisper through the storm, "I got it." The voice was deep, steady, and oddly comforting. Cassidy's head snapped up. She blinked in surprise as she saw him. Standing beside her was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with an effortless confidence about him. He wore a plain gray hoodie and dark jeans, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. There was something about his presence, calm, assured, and yet strangely familiar. His face was partially obscured by the low brim of a baseball cap, but Cassidy could feel the sincerity in his gaze. What? Cassidy stammered, unsure if she had even heard him right. Your bag fee, he said, nodding toward the counter. Let me cover it. Cassidy's lips parted in shock. She felt a surge of emotions, relief, gratitude, and just a twinge of skepticism. Who was this guy? Random acts of kindness were rare these days, especially from strangers in a busy airport. She hesitated, unsure whether to accept. I can pay you back once I get through. Her voice wavered, the weight of the moment making it hard to speak clearly. The man simply shook his head, offering a small, reassuring smile. Don't worry about it. Consider it a good deed. Cassidy swallowed hard. Everything in her wanted to refuse, to prove she could handle it on her own, but she knew she was out of options. And something about him, his quiet assurance, the way he didn't make a big deal of it, made her trust him. Thank you, she said softly, feeling her cheeks flush with a mix of relief and embarrassment. As the man stepped forward and handed his credit card to the airline agent, Cassidy watched in awe. The transaction took seconds, but to her, it felt like a lifetime. The agent, who had once looked exasperated, now offered a smile as she handed Cassidy her ticket. You're all set, ma'am. Enjoy your flight, the attendant said cheerfully, as if the past 15 minutes of Cassidy's panic had never happened. Cassidy clutched the boarding pass tightly, her hands still trembling. She turned to her unexpected savior, searching for the right words. I really don't know how to thank you, she said, eyes brimming with genuine appreciation. The man just chuckled lightly. Just pay it forward someday. And with that, he turned away, blending effortlessly into the crowd. Cassidy stood frozen for a moment, watching him disappear into the sea of travelers. Who was he? Why had he helped her? And more importantly, why did he seem so familiar? Her heart pounded in her chest. She felt grateful, but also oddly unsettled. The kindness of strangers wasn't something she had encountered often, and it left her feeling raw, exposed, but in a good way. The boarding announcement echoed overhead, snapping Cassidy out of her thoughts. She took a deep breath and made her way to the gate, still clutching her newly acquired ticket like a lifeline. As she settled into her seat, exhaustion finally caught up with her. The relief of being able to board was overwhelming, and yet, her thoughts kept drifting back to the stranger. She pulled out her phone and, on impulse, typed a quick post. A stranger just saved me from missing my flight at LAX. Paid for my bag without a second thought. If anyone knows who he is, let me know. I owe him big time. She attached a discreet photo she had taken. Just a quick snap of him from behind as he walked away, the gray hoodie and baseball cap making him almost anonymous. Within minutes, the post started gaining traction. Likes, comments, and shares flooded in. Some people speculated, some simply cheered for random acts of kindness, but one comment in particular stood out. Wait, isn't that Germaine Gram? Cassidy frowned. The name seemed vaguely familiar. She tapped the comment, and her eyes widened as the profile picture loaded. A photo of the very same man standing on a football field, wearing the unmistakable red and white jersey of the Arizona Cardinals. Her heart skipped a beat. No way. She quickly searched his name and stared at the images that popped up. There he was, Germaine Gram, a professional football player, known not just for his incredible talent on the field, but also for his philanthropy off of it. Cassidy's jaw dropped. The man who had just paid for her bag, the quiet, unassuming stranger, was an NFL star. Cassidy couldn't believe it. She scrolled through articles and interviews, piecing together bits of information. Germaine was known for his humble beginnings, his dedication to helping others, and his belief that small acts of kindness can change the world. Suddenly, his words rang in her ears again. Just pay it forward someday. Cassidy leaned back in her seat, staring out the airplane window as the city lights faded beneath her. Fate had a funny way of working. She had been drowning in doubt and frustration, convinced she was alone in her struggles, only to be reminded, in the most unexpected way, that kindness still existed. And sometimes, it came from the most unlikely places. As the plane soared through the night sky, Cassidy smiled to herself, feeling a renewed sense of hope. Maybe she couldn't repay him directly, but she knew one thing for sure. She was going to make sure his kindness didn't end with her. She whispered under her breath, "Thank you, Germaine." The moment the plane touched down in Arizona, Cassidy let out a breath she didn't even realize she had been holding. The journey had been long, exhausting, and emotionally draining, but she was finally home. The familiar sights of Phoenix, the warm air filtering through the cracks of the airplane door as it opened. Everything about it felt like a long-awaited hug. As she powered on her phone, a cascade of notifications flooded her screen. Hundreds of them. Her heart pounded. At first, she assumed they were just the usual post-flight messages from her mom and friends, but then she saw it. Her social media post was blowing up. Dozens of comments, shares, and messages from complete strangers filled her notifications. People she didn't even know were tagging their friends, reacting with shock, awe, and curiosity. And then she saw the comment that made her stomach drop. Wait, that's Germaine Gram, the Arizona Cardinals wide receiver? Cassidy's fingers hovered over the screen, her brain struggling to process the words. Germaine Gram? The Germaine Gram? She quickly searched his name, and there he was, flashing across her screen in countless sports articles, interview clips, and game highlights. The same quiet stranger who had stepped forward and paid for her luggage without hesitation was, in fact, one of the most well-known athletes in the country. Her jaw literally dropped. Cassidy stared at her phone, scrolling through image after image. There was no doubt it was him. The calm demeanor, the sharp jawline peeking out from under the baseball cap, the same presence that had grounded her in her moment of panic. It wasn't just the fact that he was a professional athlete that shocked her. It was that he had done it without expecting anything in return. No cameras, no publicity, just pure, unfiltered kindness. Wow, she whispered to herself, shaking her head in disbelief. Cassidy's mind replayed the entire encounter. The way he had spoken, how effortlessly he had brushed off her gratitude, as if paying for her bag was no big deal. She had met plenty of people chasing status, wealth, and validation, but Germaine? He was different. She realized something profound in that moment. True success isn't just about talent or fame. It's about humility and kindness. Later that evening, still reeling from the discovery, Cassidy decided to share her full experience. She poured her heart into a blog post, detailing everything from the initial panic at the check-in counter to the overwhelming gratitude she felt when Germaine had stepped in. She ended the post with a simple message. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change someone's entire day. If we all did something good without expecting anything in return, imagine how different the world would be. Within hours, her story was everywhere. Major news outlets picked it up, influencers reshared it, and soon, people from all over the world were sharing their own experiences of unexpected kindness. Hashtags like #KindnessMatters and #BeLikeGermaine began trending. People were inspired, not just by his fame, but by his humility. Cassidy had unknowingly started a movement. Days later, as Cassidy scrolled through the overwhelming influx of messages and interview requests, one notification stood out from the rest. A direct message from Germaine Gram. Her heart leapt into her throat as she opened it. Hey Cassidy, I saw your post. I appreciate the kind words, but honestly, I was just doing what anyone should do. Life's too short not to help people when you can. Glad you made it home safe. Keep spreading the kindness. Gee. Cassidy read the message 3 times, feeling a mix of excitement, gratitude, and disbelief. She quickly typed back, Germaine, thank you again. You have no idea how much that moment meant to me. I promise to pay it forward. A simple, thumbs up emoji came back within seconds. Classic. Cassidy sat back, smiling to herself. It wasn't about the celebrity status, the viral attention, or the likes. It was about the message. And Germaine? He didn't need to say much. His actions had already spoken volumes. Inspired by Germaine's gesture, Cassidy decided to take things one step further. She launched a small online initiative encouraging people to share their own acts of kindness and challenge others to do the same. She called it the ripple effect. Within weeks, Stories poured in from around the globe, people paying for strangers' groceries, covering someone's bus fare, or simply offering words of encouragement to those in need. Cassidy saw firsthand how one small moment of generosity could create waves of positivity. She couldn't repay Germaine directly, but she could make sure his kindness multiplied. It wasn't long before major news outlets picked up the story. Headlines read, "NFL star secretly helps stranded woman," and she only found out later. Random acts of kindness inspire a global trend. All thanks to this man. Germaine Gram's humble act of generosity sparks a viral movement. Cassidy found herself in the middle of a whirlwind of interviews, each one giving her a platform to talk about the importance of paying it forward. And every time someone asked her what she learned from the experience, she gave the same answer. Kindness is the most powerful currency we have. Weeks later, Cassidy sat in a quiet cafe back in Arizona, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had come back home thinking she was just another young woman trying to figure out life. But now, she had a purpose: to continue spreading kindness wherever she went. As she sipped her coffee, she pulled out a small notebook and wrote 3 simple goals for herself. Help at least one stranger a day. Encourage others to do the same. Always remember that one moment can change everything. A smile tugged at her lips. She was ready. And somewhere out there, she knew that Germaine Gram, whether on the football field or in an airport terminal, was continuing to do the same. Cassidy's story reminded the world that heroes aren't always the ones in capes or under stadium lights. Sometimes, they're the quiet figures in the background, offering help when no one else does. And maybe, just maybe, the world needs more people like that. So, next time you see someone struggling, ask yourself, what small act of kindness can I offer today? Cassidy's experience at the airport was more than just a fortunate encounter. It was a powerful reminder of the impact that a single act of kindness can have. In a world where people are often too busy, too distracted, or too hesitant to help, one quiet gesture can change everything. Germaine Gram's willingness to step forward, without expectation or recognition, showed that true generosity comes from the heart, not from status or wealth. This story proves that kindness is a universal language, one that transcends fame, fortune, and even fleeting moments. Cassidy realized that it's not about who you are or what you have, but what you choose to do when someone is in need. Inspired by this moment, she made a promise to herself to pay it forward and encourage others to do the same. Whether it's a small gesture or a life-changing gift, kindness has the power to create ripples that touch countless lives. So, the next time you see someone struggling, ask yourself, how can I make a difference today?